I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal before this decade is out of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the Earth.
They just had the courage to do what they had to do and get the job done, and that's how we should try and live our lives every day as a people.
30 seconds and counting.
Apollo 11, when they went to the moon, it was just a first for mankind. It takes a lot of people to make something miraculous happen.
3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff. 32 minutes past the hour.
It's taught us so much, knowing that we can go farther, knowing that we can learn this much more about things that we know practically nothing about.
60 seconds. Lights on. 30 seconds. Forward. Okay, engine stop. Houston, Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.
I have to say, I was not a little kid growing up on a farm in Michigan that looked at the sky and said, I'm going to go to the moon someday. I never thought that was a possibility.
When the option came to apply for the astronaut program, I knew that I didn't meet the test pilot trained requirement. But I thought, maybe it's a good idea to apply anyway to see what happens.
Only 24 guys got to go. But those guys never would have made it if it hadn't been for the thousands of others behind them.
When people asked me what that experience was like, I reached back to Middle Ages times when the big project that everybody could see might have been building, say, the cathedral at Chartres. It was this enormous thing that the whole community was behind, and with thousands of people of various skills working on this huge project, which was rising out of the fields and could be seen as far as the horizon.
We were called by the spacecraft contractor, and he said, I understand there's going to be a computer in here. He says, how big is it? We looked around, we saw all this electronics stuff. What should we tell him? I said, well, somebody said, well, what? Tell him a cubic foot. So that became the design principle, that you had to build a computer that would do the job, but would fit inside the space of a cubic foot.
We didn't have computer monitors or anything of that sort whatsoever. We basically dealt with paper. And that's what we stared at when we were trying to think about the software and the mission. So you knew that the answer was in there if you had a riddle to solve. You know, you had to find it, but you knew it was in there.
It taught us to approach a plan with continuity and flexibility. It inspired the world. I almost look back and seem a little naive at the time. We were pioneering, and it was exciting as hell to be a part of whatever it was.
Apollo hit me and most people very deeply emotionally.
That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
But it also had a very pragmatic side. If we set a very precise, well understood goal that humans can achieve.
What goal could be more universal than saying, I see that thing up there, I'd like to grasp it, I'd like to get my boots dirty on it.
To me, the legacy of Apollo has nothing to do with going to the moon. The legacy of Apollo is that we can do anything we want to if we put our minds to it.
We face problems now that are harder, in a sense, than Apollo, because sometimes there's a lot of uncertainty about what the problem actually is.
You throw up your hands and you say, global warming, what can we do about it? It's too far gone.
When we talk about ending hunger, what would that mean? I mean, what is the requirement? How do you know if you've done it?
I
I think to say that we need an Apollo-like program for solving the issues of, say, energy and the environment is to say that we need a coordinated effort that drives energies in a very particular direction.
It will consist of many, many Apollo-like efforts in many different areas to finally solve this challenge.
In that speech, President Kennedy also said, we choose to do these things not because they are easy,
but because they are hard. Because that goal will serve to organize and measure the best of our energies and skills. Because that challenge is one that we're willing to accept, one we are unwilling to postpone, and one we intend to win.
We need that kind of thinking, that kind of inspiration again.
There's a real need worldwide to educate a generation that can come and meet these grand challenges.
Developing a technology just sort of for research's sake is sort of not enough. You really need to take that idea and allow it to improve people's lives.
This generation coming on now is going to have enormous opportunities. If we put our faith in them, I'm absolutely confident that it will be well placed.
One of the interesting things about Apollo is the idea that we were able to do something really fantastic in the 60s that we're not exactly able to do today. And people in my generation really feel that that should be corrected, that we shouldn't have gone backwards.
I'd like to see people living on the moon. That'd be so cool.
It's a whole new world out there, and to actually set up and live there, and like have a regular lifestyle like on Earth, that would be incredible.
Beyond our solar system, we don't really know what it's like out there. We don't know if there's another planet like ours. We don't know if there's really life out there, whatever kind of life it might be.
The giant leap that we should be making now is not, do we send humans back to the moon and onto Mars, but how do we send them there?
We're going to move on to the next challenge, which is to go back to the moon. And it's not to go there and touch the moon like we did before, but this time we're going to go to the moon with the intent of staying.
Going to the moon is what my parents' generation did, what we should do again. But it's really saying, how do we go beyond that?
Time's a wasting. I think we've been marking time a little bit in low Earth orbit. The objective is to get to the surface of Mars in a stepping stone way.
One of the lasting contributions of Apollo, I think, was that picture that was sent back that Christmas Eve of Earthrise over the moon's horizon.
In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. And the earth was without form and void.
Here was this blue planet with white clouds looking very fragile, and indeed it is.
And God said, let there be light. And there was light.
By standing outside of the Earth and looking back, we learn new things. This first pictures coming back from Apollo really drove Earth Day and the environmental movement.
Knowledge is power. Knowing certain things can help you to go on to learn even more things, and it's just a never-ending chain of learning and just collecting this information and intellect, and it's just amazing.
So my challenge to all of us is, how do we take that spirit of Apollo, that excitement we felt during Apollo, and now have that same excitement, that same spirit to keep us moving forward, to solve problems we don't even know about today?
Here man completed his first exploration of the moon. May the spirit of peace in which we came be reflected in the lives of all mankind.
So welcome. I'm Daniel Hastings, the department head of the MIT Department of Aeronautics and Astronautics. Welcome to this celebration where we reflect upon what was accomplished by the trips and the landing on the moon 50 years ago and look forward to great things going to be happening in the space enterprise in the next 50 years. We're here to celebrate the achievements of these great individuals. Some of us who are here today, who 50 years ago put human feet on the moon. We're hosting this celebration because the MIT Aero and Astro department, which contained the instrumentation lab, was instrumental in developing the guidance system that got the astronauts all the way to the surface of the moon. Now, while the instrumentation lab was part of the department, it dwarfed the department. It had some 2,000 people and occupied 14 buildings at MIT, so it was actually more like the department was a small pimple on the instrumentation lab. I'm very conscious that my distinguished predecessor, Doc Draper, the head of the MIT Aeronautics and Astronautics department from 1951 to 1966, and also head of the instrumentation lab, which later became Draper Lab, was critical to this effort. Doc was a man with vision, with drive, with courage. I read a letter recently where at the age of 60, in 1961, he volunteered for service as a crew member on the Apollo mission to the moon. As he said in the letter to Bob Siemens, who was also from the MIT Aero and Astro department, we at the instrumentation lab are going full throttle on the Apollo guidance work. If I'm willing to hang my life and our equipment, the whole project will surely have the strongest possible motivation, and discussions of general design and details will be most responsible to my inputs. Of course, now we know that they were successful. I'd like to put what happened then and is happening now in the context of three eras I think of as in space, of which, of course, are somewhat overlapping, so it's not like it's a unique set. I became fascinated, like some of those students you see, by space in the era of the original Star Trek and Apollo. I was 14 and on a plane over the Caribbean when the pilot came on and said the first man had landed on the moon. That was literally a first in human history. It was so exciting. I knew then, at that time, that I wanted to work on Apollo. So I call that the age of space 1.0. It was an age of space where there was superpower rivalry with the development of spy satellites on both sides and the use of human spaceflight as a means to show the superiority of one system over another. Of course, started with Sputnik, culminated with Apollo, with a long tail going through space shuttle and the space station programs. Fortunately, after the end of the Cold War, the station became a means for multiple countries to actually work together, including Russia and the US in space. The second age of space, I think of, starts shortly after the first, which was the use of space to provide benefits to the general public, as well as the operational military, as opposed to the strategic posture of the US and USSR. And of course, greatly enhanced science in space. It started with communication satellites, which enabled pictures to be beamed around the world and communications to become global. Spread to navigation and precise timing, what we now call GPS, which enabled a revolution in both warfare and in commercial usage. So when integrated with a map, it allows us to navigate all over the world, to find a nearby place to eat, and many other interesting things. So there's also the growth of science in space, which led to unparalleled views of the Earth and to wonderful discoveries in space. Witness the impact of the Hubble Space Telescope on all the planets that have now been discovered around other stars. The fantastic things we have learned from space science by looking at our solar system and discovering many planets around other stars shows that we're in a new era. When I went to school, we believed that Pluto was a planet, and we had no idea what it looked like, and we didn't know there were planets around other stars. Now we know Pluto is actually a dwarf planet. We actually know what it looked like, and we've made great progress in exploring Mars, our nearest neighbor, which is, of course, potentially inhabitable by humans. We have vehicles that drive around on Mars, vehicles in orbit around Mars, and we know that Mars had large, shallow oceans early in its history. We have heard about the excitement of putting down robotic vehicles there, as well as possibly how we might get human beings to Mars. Now, with the exception of the communications satellites and of course, DirecTV, all of the things I just said are still government enterprises like occurred in Aerospace 1.0. On a personal note, I've had the pleasure, even though I didn't get to work on Apollo, I have actually done work for Boeing on their ion engines that they use in the big communication satellites. I worked on the design of the power system on the space station. So I feel I've been very fortunate because I've managed to work in the era of both Space 1.0 and Space 2.0. The third phase of space, Space 3.0, I think is what we'll hear some about this afternoon, is the development and growth of entrepreneurial private enterprises driving space, as well as the development of more and more capable small satellite systems. This entrepreneurial private enterprise is leading to new ways to get to space for human beings, new profit-making ventures for space involving data services back to the Earth, and of course, many, many countries now entering the space enterprise through the venue of both launch and of launching small satellites. This Space 3.0, I think, has the opportunity for many players, including small startups, to derive new value from space. I think, and many other people think, it's the most exciting time in space since the days when Armstrong and Aldrin landed on the moon. Today's students, I mean, some of the students here can actually think about and design a small satellite and see it launched into space. Many student groups have now done that. People are now talking, as you know, about sending small, very small satellites to the next star. So these are just truly amazing times. Will there finally be a wholly private enterprise in space apart from communication satellites? Will we be able to fly into space in the same routine way that we fly on airplanes? This new era includes both the big satellites, the size of buses, and small satellites, the size of iPhones. The new era includes reusable rockets, which reuse the engines, which lower the cost of access to space and from being more expensive than buying a kilogram of gold to something much less expensive than that. It offers 3D printing in space, and private companies saying they want to go to Mars and provide space-based internet access to 4 billion people using thousands of satellites. It involves the first serious attempt to do orbital servicing of satellites, which will make them reusable and flexible in a way they're not now. So, the space enterprise is really changing, and it's fun to be here. But first, we're going to reflect on what happened 50 years ago. As I said, this was made possible by the contributions of the instrumentation lab at MIT, then part of the department. So our morning is going to be devoted to the great work and the courage of 50 years ago, and the afternoon to looking forward to what's going to actually become. So I'm looking forward to the day. I hope you all are. And with that, let me introduce my colleague, Professor David Newman, the Apollo Professor of Aeronautics and Astronautics, former NASA Deputy Administrator, who will introduce Major General retired Charles Bolden, the former NASA Administrator.